Welcome to A Case of the Mondays, a podcast by 3R Strategy where we talk about some of the most pressing issues facing HR professionals and business leaders. From fair treatment of employees to fostering transparency in the workplace, we'll explore how to create an environment where people don't just have to come to work, but want to. So, if you're feeling blue, tune in and join the conversation so you don't end up with a case of the Mondays.
Welcome to another episode of Case of the Mondays. My name is Ramesh Kaleem, your podcast host, and today we're discussing transparency. And no, it's not just pay transparency, but we're going to talk about everything related to transparency in the workplace. And I'm delighted to have our guest today, Adam Horn, who is one of the co-founders at OpenOrg. And they're on a mission to rebuild trust by bringing transparency to the world of work. Obviously, that's very similar in terms of the mission of what we do at 3R Strategy. We're very focused around pay and pay transparency. But Adam, obviously, firstly, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. So glad to be here.
So there's obviously a lot of similarities in our mission and what we're doing. And I think we were connected a couple of months ago. Just because there is so much similarity. So can you tell us a bit about how this whole idea came about that you wanted to focus on transparency in the workplace?
For sure. And you're right. We cross over a lot. But I think we're tackling this from different backgrounds in different ways. So my backgrounds are not pay and reward and compensation necessarily. It's more talent and hiring and people. So my background in a nutshell, sort of 9 to 12 years of hiring for companies, but also building and hiring for my own companies as founder or co-founder. And I've seen the issues that are caused by not being transparent when you hire. So starting at that very moment of attracting talent to your business, if you're not transparent, if you're not honest about who you are, what you need from people and what you can give them, that filters through into cultural issues once they're through the door and once they land in your business. So that's been a bugbear for me for many years. I've seen companies that are super transparent and the benefits that they have because of that. And I've seen companies that are quite secretive and maybe share the wrong picture of who they truly are and the issues that are caused after people come in. When it comes to things like engagement levels, attrition levels, you can't hide from those metrics. So for a number of years, I've seen the benefits of transparency and the pitfalls with not being transparent. And it's been something that I've wanted to explore and look into for quite some time. I've just never had that light bulb moment until recently of how I can play a part and help that. And that's where OpenOrgs come in.
Okay. And so can you think of a particular event or a trigger you thought, okay, I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to do this and focus on transparency? Or is this something that has really accumulated over time and you thought, I've had enough now?
A bit of both, to be honest. There was a mini light bulb moment, I would say. So I've had this long, career. Sadly, feels quite long anyway. Looks if you're watching, it probably look like I'm older than I am. But a lot of experience, as I mentioned, with transparent and non-transparent companies and the benefits of that. But I actually made the conscious decision to leave my last business, which I was co-founder of, towards the end of last year. I didn't have anything to go and do. I didn't have OpenOrg in my mind at that time. I just knew my passion wasn't there, and it felt unfair to stay doing that as co-founder. So I exited and used that as an opportunity to take stock and work out what I wanted to do next. And actually part of that was saying, actually, I don't think I want to build another business as a co-founder. I really like the idea of going and joining a business as an employee for the first time in 10 years and learning from a CEO or co-founder. So I actually, around Christmas time last year, took some time to apply to some roles. And it was the first time I was an applicant for 12 years. And I was horrified, despite ironically working in the talent space for this time as a recruiter. I'd never had to apply to roles and really shocked just that the the vagueness of career sites and job descriptions, the unknown around interview process and feedback. And as a candidate, as an applicant, you really just are left completely in the dark quite often. You don't really know what lies ahead. And that, a big part of that, as you all know, is pay and compensation, and what am I going to get, and what does that look like? But all the other things, culture, how do you work? How am I going to fit into this team and work and succeed or fail, or so on and so forth. So that was the mini light bulb moment for me in some respects. That suddenly took me back to thinking about some of the companies that I've loved over the years and really admired. And when I went back to look at those companies to see if they were hiring, seeing the handbooks, seeing how they present themselves, made me realize I'm in love with these brands and these companies, but I don't know why. And that was the light bulb moment. It's the transparency piece. I trust them. I believe in them, and really have some affinity towards what they're doing. And that comes in different levels of extremity, but that was the light bulb moment where we said, actually, and I say we because it was myself and my co-founder John, we sort of said, like, this is what we do. Like, this is how we go in and fix this, and we found a way to go in and help companies with that.
Okay, and so can you give us an example of, because obviously, we talk about pay transparency, and that's a very specific area, but I think you're looking at various different aspects. So what are some of the other aspects where you think organizations should be transparent? Obviously, recruitment, for example, could be one area, but do you have like a list of categories where you're saying these are all the things that you should be transparent about?
Yeah, so we've designed and built and deliver a framework into companies that covers about 35 different areas of their business. Broadly, that sits under 6 different pillars. So we've got things like flexibility, diversity, career development, compensation, hiring, for example. So we look at different areas of the business and break that down even further to look at specific things within that. So as an example, with compensation, it's not just saying, hey, let's look at salary. It's also commission, bonus. We include things like maternity, paternity pay in there as well, and under that pillar. I think one of the other key ones that businesses struggle with at the moment, even though it might seem simple, is flexibility. Giving clarity to candidates and employees around when we work and where we work is really important now, post-COVID. The world's been turned upside down. We work in such different ways now. And you used to, if you go back a few years, have things like working hours on job adverts, which got removed over time because they felt like they weren't really needed. We do need them now because a lot of companies are remote, hybrid. They don't, watch their employees all the time or drag them into an office for a certain time. So people need more clarity around, when am I expected to work? What are the rules? How can I do this? And is this going to be right for me? And it blows me away the amount of companies we look at, the career sites, the job descriptions, the amount that they don't give clarity over these simple things. But it's so powerful if you can. It's so powerful if you can go that little bit further. So flexibility is probably one really big area, but also, like you say, there's a heap around hiring that can help people understand more about what lies ahead in the interview process, for example.
Yeah, so I think that's really interesting because I came across something that you shared actually on LinkedIn, and it was around job adverts, and because we're currently recruiting for a reward analyst role, and I actually looked at your job ad recommendations, and I think one of the things like you said, is simple things that you don't always think about. So one thing that I really picked up from there was transparency over the interview process. To say, if you are applying for this, then this will probably take up 3 hours of your time. And this is the first interview, this is the second interview, this is the test. So we actually added that onto our ad and job description. And I think I think that's really helpful from a candidate's perspective, because, I know people who have gone through 4, 5, 6 interviews, and it just seems ridiculous that you're spending so much time with so much uncertainty around whether you're going to get anything out of it or not. So do you, we're talking specifically around recruitment at this stage, do you have an example of an organization that you think they're doing a great job with recruitment in how transparent they are with the process and everything that they're sharing with their candidates?
Yeah, there's a heap out there that we come across. One great example, which is like gold standard in every department, to be honest with you, is a company called Juro, Juro. Awesome tech scale up business that they have a heap of plethora of information on their like career site, which they use Notion for their career site currently, and they have an employee handbook, but they go so deep on everything, and interview process is one of those things. So they do very clearly, similar to you have with your ad, talk about the different stages, how long each stage takes, the total time commitment into that process, and just giving that clarity builds comfort and confidence in candidates' minds. Some people are more anxious around interviewing and so on and so forth, and just having an understanding of what this process might look like ahead is really comforting. But also, I've got friends over the years who have gone through interview processes with companies who have been dream employers to start with, and these things have just dragged on and on and on and on, and they put up with it, and they go through the motions, but you can see the erosion of trust and the frustration that is building over time, and that erosion of trust before someone's even joined the business is not a good thing. So just being clear up front really helps. So Juro is a great example, and there's a few others out there who do a really good job on this as well, which is it's becoming a better handled aspect of hiring.
I'm a data person, because we work on pay, we look at a lot of data, and so one of the things when it comes to pay transparency is I'm always thinking about, and we're always discussing, is what is the data telling us around what are candidates. So for example, there's a recent Gartner study which found that last year 44% of candidates, based on their sample, said that they didn't apply for a job because there was no salary range listed alongside it. There was a recent Adobe study that found that 85% of Gen Z employees said that they probably wouldn't apply for a job if there wasn't a salary range. So that data is really helpful in explaining the real value, that this is not just something that we're talking about. This is really impacting your ability as an organization to attract talent in the first place, people even applying for a job. So just wondering, do you have any data, or have you come across any research around more general transparency in organizations beyond pay, to say this is the real impact of transparency in your interview process, or in the culture, or in what you're sharing with your employees?
Yeah, we're a young company, so whilst we plan to run our own surveys, reports one day, we're relying on some other ones across the industry, like your Adobes, etc., in Gartner's for the time being. But Gallup is probably the one that is most widely referenced in terms of some of the studies they've run, and this is more relevant maybe at board level, but maybe is the thing that gets CEOs, founders, etc., to listen in. Transparency is heavily linked to profitability and productivity. So transparent companies have been found to be, I think, 21 to 22, 23% more productive than non-transparent. And in turn, 21, 22% more profitable than non-transparent companies. So that was a Gallup study that was done a while back, which showed the benefits financially of being more open as a business. And when you think about it without the data, it makes complete sense. If you remove yourself from work, as human beings, day to day in any walk of life, you want honesty, you want trust, transparency from people that you meet and interact with, and the same applies at work. The more you're trusted, the more engaged you are, the more involved you are, and the more productive you will be, and the more successful the business will be as well. So there's plenty of studies out there on a broader perspective with regards to benefits of transparency for a business. There's a lot out there that point to benefits of transparency around engagement and also attrition, or attrition or retention, tackling similar things for employees. But effectively, transparent companies will have higher engagement within their workforce, and much better metrics when it comes to attrition and retention.
Okay. And I guess, there is a lot of data around the correlation between engagement and productivity and profitability as well. I think the other thing that I find that in pay transparency all the time, and you probably find that as well, is sometimes we can think of this as a binary issue. So you're either
Mm,
transparent or you're not, but we know that there's different levels of transparency that you can have.
mm.
And so is that one of the things that, when you're, for example, speaking to organizations, you look at the level of transparency and, you know, is it this is the level of transparency that everyone should be at, or is it different levels of transparency that suit different types of organizations and cultures? And just to give you an example, for when we talk about pay transparency, I know there are examples like Buffer that
Mm.
share everyone's individual salary with people, and they have a formula that they use. But I personally don't think that that is something that will suit every culture. And I also think that, for example, at 3R, we have transparency over everything and pay ranges and but we don't share people's individual salaries, because I think it should be a personal choice. That somebody wants to share their salary, you're more than welcome to, but I shouldn't be making that decision on your behalf. So what is your perspective on that level of transparency? Is there a right or wrong answer, or is it different things suit different people?
There's a contextual happy medium for every business, I think, and each to their own to a degree. As long as for us there's some minimum bar being met within companies. So yeah, I think for me the answer is that there's a minimum bar, but it's actually really low, to be honest with you. So what we're not trying to do with Open Org is to create radical companies like Buffers. It's really cool. Like, and I'm sure you're probably similar. It's not when it's not your business, and you can look at some other really radical examples. You can sit there and say, yeah, this is awesome. I love seeing these things, but it shouldn't be what every company aspires to do. And on that pay example, I'm full alignment with you. I don't see the necessity personally. I'm sure there's some benefits for Buffer, no doubt, but you don't need to go that extreme. And I think if you try to encourage that as the norm, you'd find it even harder to encourage companies to make that change. So people typically don't care what their colleagues are on; they care more about what they're on, and whether that's been calculated fairly with some sound decision making and process behind that. So showing people that is the more important thing. And when it comes to other aspects of your business, we use this too often, I suppose, when we talk to people, but the framework that we've built across all these different areas, we talk about it a bit like a buffet. So these 35 different areas that we've got, we've got 3 different levels within each to correlate to sort of the level of extremity or radicalness, as it were, that you might want to show. But we're not trying to get every company to that top level. The minimum is, hey, we want you to get to this first level, and that if you do that across enough areas, it's enough to get you accredited, for example, and that's what we want to achieve. And the idea behind it is small incremental changes across your business, safe baby steps that are very non-scary, elevate your business as far as trust goes and communication and clarity goes. And it's the minimum things that most employees expect and most applicants expect when they're looking at your business. People want to understand, what will I be paid? When will I work? How do I work? Those sorts of things are important, but a huge majority of companies don't tell people that until they get to an interview, and there's a lot of time wastage before that, which could be fixed.
Do you also find that there's one thing is around not sharing any information, so there's a lack of transparency, but there's also where organizations are sharing information, but actually it turns out to be more of a PR exercise rather than actually what the culture is of the organization. And how do you sort of differentiate with between those two?
Yeah, I've heard of a few examples, maybe where people feel like there's, they're doing this for PR. And I guess if they want to do that, then fine. It works actually. Even if it's a PR exercise, it seems like there's benefits still to doing that they maybe didn't realize they would get. So great. The danger with doing it, if you're going to try and do it as a PR exercise, is, can you sustain that? Is it genuinely the values and the culture that you believe in, or are you doing it, for a commercial exercise to try and win clients or whatever that might be? And if you are, it's less likely you'll sustain that, and it's more likely that it will backfire at some point. So for me, I'm not trying to make every company in the world, operate with lots of transparency, because it just doesn't work for lots of companies and lots of different industries. But if you can, and it aligns to values of the business, then there are ways to elevate that for sure.
Have you read? So I read a book of quite a few years ago on. Well, it wasn't supposed to be on transparency, but there was a lesson in there on transparency, which has always stuck with me, and actually it significantly changed how I run like 3R strategy as well. Have you read Work Rules by Laszlo Bock?
Heard of it, but I've not read it. No.
Okay, because that was so he was the former sort of HR director at Google, and Google have they had this big thing around transparency, and they do things like, for example, record all of their meetings that are then available for everyone to see, because they're saying, that there's not that everyone goes and watches other people's meetings. I'm sure they don't have time, but it's just the level of transparency. It's a culture. But one of the things, because I think a few years ago, so fairly early on in the company, I used to think that I was quite transparent about stuff. And then I was reading the book, and what he said was that if you are sharing information with people in your organization and it doesn't make you slightly uncomfortable, then you're not sharing enough with them. And I found that really, because I remember thinking at the time, yeah, it doesn't make me comfortable. But, and so from that point on, actually, I started to share a lot more. We share everything apart from, like I said, individual salaries. So we share financials on a quarterly basis and how everything is going. So what do you think about that concept of, should it make you slightly uncomfortable when you get a level of transparency, or is that the wrong way to think about it?
Yeah, really interesting point. I don't know when it was written either, but my gut instinct is it may be that times have changed and evolved a little bit as well. And generally speaking, there's still huge issues out there, but there are so many progressive leaders and companies out there now that are doing some really great stuff. So they probably don't feel uncomfortable at all sharing information. And there's some examples where companies possibly couldn't share it anymore. There's a great, I think my favorite all-time company that I am in love with is a company called PostHog. So they share their product roadmap and their strategy on their website with everyone, and they know their competitors can see it. You could argue, okay, this must make us feel a bit uncomfortable, but they embrace it, they wear it, they don't care about competitors, they're focused on what they do, how they do it, and they probably couldn't get to a stage where they're sharing anything that is uncomfortable unless it's verging on private, confidential, legal, which, but there's always something you can't share, and that's a can of worms in itself. And that if companies go down the route of telling the world that they're transparent, there's always going to be that question from somewhere to say, why aren't you sharing this particular piece of information? And there's always something that companies can't share. Even GitLab, the undisputed most transparent company in the world, is very open on their values of saying, even though this is a value, there's things we can't share. And we're not going to necessarily tell you now what they are, but there are things we can't share. So there will be an element of discomfort and conversations internally where there's a moment where someone asks for something or expects something and they can't share it. But I think things are slowly changing. I think there's a lot going on in the world outside of what we're doing as well. There's the Build in Public movement, which is great to see. And that's a little bit more focused on companies sharing things like revenues, performance, that sort of stuff on a monthly basis. But it's really encouraging to see people talking more openly about that rather than having this sort of secretive, we're in it for ourselves and, we don't want our competitors to see what we're doing type mentality, because it doesn't necessarily benefit you, I don't think.
I will say that discomfort goes over time. So
Yeah.
Now I have no discomfort over, and I don't think we could share anything else anyway. So when when you are working with organizations and you're looking at transparency, I know one of the things that you are looking at is this certification around transparency. And my question around that is, um, what is the need for that certification, where organizations, for example, are being transparent and they have these processes in place? Is it more a case of here's confirmation that we are doing this and it helps them from an attraction perspective, or are there other benefits of having this certification as well?
Yeah, great question, and one that we've wrestled with a little bit, because going back to our purpose and why we exist, and one of the things that drove us to set OpenOrg up was a frustration around the world of employer brand, and the fact that it's become this sort of race to throw as many badges on your website now as possible to say, hey, we're a great company to work for. I won't name names, but there's a lot of very artificial badges that you can go out and buy now. A couple of £1,000, and then half an hour later you get sent a marketing pack and a load of stuff. It doesn't mean anything unless you give it some context, and it's becoming a bit of a it's becoming a bit of a sales exercise to try and attract talent, and it's frustrating for us on a personal level to watch this. However, OpenOrg as a business is also certifying companies and giving them a badge at some point. So we face this question a lot. So a couple of things really. Number one, we have to do it. The most transparent companies in the world, to a degree, you could argue, how do we actually know what they're saying is true? Like, anyone can build an employee handbook now, put some information on it. You're not fixing the issue necessarily. So part of being able to verify that a company is being honest is about saying, we've seen this information, we can verify it, but also we've got this dual layer verification process where we will actually canvass and survey the company's employees as well to say, this is the information your company is sharing. How close is this to reality in your belief? And we get enough information back from those employees to be able to say, yes, they're saying this information, we can verify it, and the employees can verify it as well. The big thing for us is to try and show people that our badge is not about saying that this is a great place to work. We're not putting this on companies' websites and saying, come and work here, you're going to have the best time ever. All we're saying is, what you read here is true. So what you see is what you get. And we're not saying this is a great place to work. We're saying there's honesty in what they're saying. It could be that the work we actually do is actually to encourage companies to say things like, hey, we're doing terribly with diversity, but these are the things we're trying to work on. Or, hey, by the way, we don't have a career development framework in place at the moment. We're working on it, but it's not there. And you need to know that up front. It's about setting and managing expectations up front. And the final piece of the puzzle for us is it's a mark of accountability, a bit more like a B Corp accreditation for us. B Corp isn't necessarily going out to say, hey, come and work for us because we're the best company in the world. There's some attraction there for a lot of people, but actually there's an accountability piece to something like a B Corp, and it's the same with us that we're sort of going down the route of, is by making a public commitment to transparency. Even if you're not the most transparent company in the world yet, you are saying, we care about this. We haven't perfected it yet. We are on that journey and we want to be held publicly accountable to it. And by doing that, your employees see it, your potential employees see it, and they know that you've got flaws and weaknesses and nothing's perfect, but that wins you fans. That does actually build some affinity to your brand. But we're very much against the artificial badges that are designed to be talent attraction tools, because talent attraction is where a lot of these issues are caused. Magnetizing more people to your business is not what we need. It's getting the right people and turning off the people who probably shouldn't be applying to your business, and that's what companies don't do enough of.
Yeah, I mean, interesting you mentioned B Corp, because that's the one that I had in mind as well. And so personally, I have not really gone down that route or looked at it, because again, I think it does sort of feel like, for example, we have a charity partner and we support them on a quarterly basis and doing all of those things. And we're a fully remote company. We don't do a lot of traveling or all that carbon footprint or anything like that. So, but Although there's another one, I can't remember the name, but where you say that you are, every time you get a project, you're donating to a particular cause, and it goes on your website and how much you're doing. But you have to pay on an annual basis, like a few £1,000s to do that. And part of me thinks is, well, if we're doing this stuff, why not just put that 2 or 3,000 towards the cause that we're supporting rather than having a badge? But from what you're saying, I think it's what we discussed earlier is differentiating the organizations that might be doing it as a PR exercise from the ones that are actually doing it. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, for sure. And we're trying to be that accountability partner to companies over the years. People can get lost with transparency. Again, I won't name names, but there's a very well-known tech company a household name, who over the years have almost pioneered this alongside a few others as well, and became very well known for how open and transparent they were. But then things started disappearing from websites. They had a transparency dashboard, which you now can't access, and things like that. And speaking to some of the ex-employees there, the feeling is very much like they set out to do this. They didn't really set any guide rails around like why they were doing it or what it meant to them. And we became a little bit lost, and it doesn't really mean anything now. And so if you want to do this, and not everyone will, and that's the key, like if you want to do this, it's about saying, hey, we want to have an external partner that can keep us accountable, so who can come in once a year, again, like a B Corp, for example, and say, right, how are you doing? Are you maintaining that bar? Are you still doing what you said you would be doing? And is it still relevant? And if you don't do that, things can get out of control. So again, for us, this isn't a talent attraction exercise. Some of the things we ask companies to do when they join us on things like cohorts and go through the accreditation is uncomfortable. We talked about being uncomfortable earlier. We're asking companies to do some really uncomfortable things on their careers site, like say, you shouldn't apply if, or you won't like it here if. And we're asking them to be very honest about how they're doing with things like diversity. And we're pushing the boundaries and the limits with them individually, but they're doing this because they believe in the concept that being more transparent will help them long term in so many different ways. So that's not something that someone would typically do if they're just looking to get some more applications. And it's frustrating. There was one career site I looked at the other day. They had a section that just said diversity. A couple of lines underneath that said, we're really big on our diversity. We love it. They had 3 badges next to it. They didn't say anything else. There's nothing else on the career site at all about what they're actually doing to try and foster a diverse environment and a diverse business. What do these badges mean? There's no links to anywhere to go and look at anything. It's just an artificial badge to try and make people think, oh, they must be diverse. And that's what we're trying to tackle, not in an aggressive way, but in a very supportive way to help people understand this is what candidates see, and people are becoming very wise to this now.
Yeah, and I think it's also, when you look at websites like Glassdoor, where if you do hire employees on, with false advertising or these PR exercise, I think over time it will come back and hurt you through these reviews and so on. And so I don't know if you know about the EU directive that's coming in. And I mean, this is again specifically around pay transparency, but it's thing because we've talked a bit about having salary ranges on job ads, and that's something that's going to become, well, we're not officially part of the EU anymore, so unfortunately it won't necessarily impact directly, but hopefully the UK government will start to adopt some of these laws. But that's something which could happen because organizations are forced to do this. And if I think about this from a pay perspective, I think it's really problematic if this law comes in, because this is not something you can do overnight, right? If you don't have pay ranges, you have no idea about your pay ranges, and suddenly by law, you're required to put something out there, then you could annoy a lot of employees. And if you don't have this right. So this is an ongoing process. So in the same way, do you think that there might be some legislation coming in around other aspects of transparency in organizations, that where organizations might be forced to do something rather than, being encouraged to do it because they're struggling to recruit?
I think if it's going to happen anywhere, it will be around pay, personally. Just because you look at other regions of the world who are doing this, there's examples to follow there. And I think pay is the thing that maybe can start triggering the dominoes effect with other areas. Pay is intrinsically linked with career development, and then intrinsically linked with performance reviews. For example, you can't necessarily just put salary bands in place, in my opinion, and then be done with it. People then want to understand, right, how are you making the decision around where I am on the band and how I progress, and then you need a career development framework that you can lean on and a performance review process to talk to. And so I think it will be a lot of work for companies, for sure. But it astounds me that there's companies out there operating without any of these things in place. You wonder how on earth they get to the point, that they're at sometimes. It's basic business acumen, really, I would suggest. And there's an example, just to stay on the pay thing. There's an example I came across the other week. Someone had actually gone and done some benchmarking behind the scenes for their leadership team to try and build a business case around this. They discovered that they've been massively overpaying their new hires. So it wasn't like, hey, we're secretive because we want to underpay people. They didn't know that they were overpaying people massively. And presenting that then to the leadership team was eye-opening by the sounds of it, because they realized, okay, well, we could have been saving money here if we'd have put these things in place. So lots of people think companies aren't doing this. They're doing it on purpose to underpay me. They're not. They just don't often have them in place, but they need to understand that they can actually save a heap of money often. It's not about sometimes CEOs think, okay, once I do this, I'm going to end up having to pay people more, but you might find out that you're actually paying people too much. And that might actually have a positive effect on your bottom line as well.
Yeah, I think that is a very common challenge. Everyone is willing to pay more for external talent, because when you're working somewhere, everyone gets the same 2-3% pay rise. But you know that if you go and work elsewhere, you're much likely to get a higher pay increase. And so everyone is willing to pay more for external talent. And we're constantly recruiting people on salaries that are higher than our existing employees. So we're bringing people in that we don't know, and we're paying them a lot more than people who are already making a contribution to our organization. And that's one of the key reasons why a lot of organizations don't want to share salary ranges. So I'll share another stat with you, because we just published our global salary planning survey. So we had 450 organizations, and we asked how many have salary ranges. And it was around 60% of organizations said that they have salary ranges. But out of this group of organizations, 77% said that they don't share it with their employees. So they've done the work, they've put together the salary ranges, they have all this information, but they're too scared to share this with employees. And it's because of reasons like you're recruiting people on higher salaries than your existing employees. Is because we know that inequity exists, because we ask questions like, what is your current salary during the process? And so there is a lot of this work is done. And I think it's just about encouraging organizations to share this, because it's, they've done a lot of the hard work, but it just psychologically, they just can't bring themselves to share this.
And yeah, it's funny, you talk about transparency and being uncomfortable earlier. Sometimes there's a reason for feeling uncomfortable about it, and it's because you've probably known for a long time in your gut that even before you discover this yourself, that you're underpaying people, or it might be doing something else outside of pay. But then you see the data, the facts, the figures, and you're faced with this uncomfortable decision to say, do I share it, do I not? But hiding it away isn't going to fix it. These people are adults. They know they're not kids. They probably know what other companies are paying. If they feel like they're underpaid, they're probably looking at other roles anyway. It's just no way to run a company. And I get that it can get bigger and more complicated if you have larger companies to run. But it's a reason, if you've got a smaller business at the moment, get on top of it now, fix it, and do the right thing, because you're going to be facing some massive problems further down the line otherwise.
Yeah, I think so. when we work with organizations, we often find that what they imagine in terms of what the changes that they need to make or how much it's going to cost is ultimately it's only a fraction of what they'd imagined. So it's not as bad as they imagine these things to be. That's the first thing I would say. But also, like you said before, it gets worse. If you don't do anything, you could end up with what happened to Birmingham City Council, right?
Yeah.
Where you end up being bankrupt because you can't afford to pay the equal pay claims.
And you don't want to see that happen, but once it happens this will become a more regular occurrence as time goes on. People will start lifting their head up a bit more and saying, hey, it happened here. This is a thing. And I want to find out, if I've got a reason to be, making a claim or doing this or doing that. And I get that scares companies a bit, but
yeah,
you can fix this. You can do something about it now and take some reasonable measures. And yes, there might be some work involved, but not as much work and stress involved as in having to fix it further down the line as well.
Yeah. So, ordinarily, I would ask some challenging questions or try and think of some challenging questions. But because our mission is so aligned, I'm struggling to think of some. So I'm going to ask a slightly unrelated question to transparency because I think you posted something or commented something around this. And I see a lot of people comment around this topic of, when organizations say we are like a family. And a lot of people get really annoyed saying, why are you saying this? And you shouldn't be saying this. So I personally don't see the big deal, but I know you don't like it. So what is wrong with saying that?
Honestly, I don't have a huge issue with it. Like companies, I wouldn't get on like a high horse about it too much. I think it's it possibly sets off the wrong tone, potentially. But like, I think the thing you've got to the thing that most people seem to resonate with more and more as time goes on is not necessarily like a family. And you see all the examples that people throw out there. Like, yeah, I just fired my my family member today. I told my toddler we're facing tough times, so he's going to have to go find another family to join. And there's some like comical sort of posts out there online. So honestly, it's each to their own. I wouldn't necessarily go down the route of sort of referring to my company or my team as a family proactively. I probably have at some point now, by saying, what, it feels like we're a family or something like that, because we get along. But actually, when you sit back and think about it, most families are pretty dysfunctional at times. I probably gotten on more with my colleagues and my employees than my family sometimes. Yeah. So I think it's where I have the frustration, I suppose, sort of zoning in on it, is it starts presenting this shiny, perfect idea of what a company is like to work at. Because that's what people are trying to do with this. Is like, hey, come and join us. We're a family. Everyone's got this like perfect, family in their mind that they're going to go and work with, and that is at the core of what we're trying to fix with the employer branding piece as well. It's like, hey, it's not all sunshine and rainbows and happiness, and there's tough times, there's bad days, there's conflict, and conflict isn't a bad thing necessarily. There are really hard decisions we have to make, and we argue, we disagree, but
that's a family.
Yeah, it is a family. It's true. But I think the way that phrase has been used has been to try and present like a positive connotation of come here, it's going to be great, and we all love each other, and we're all going to get on really, really well. That's not the reality of a business. Some business and businesses get on, employees get on, and work really well. But if you want to call it a family, then go for it. And if you don't, you don't. I think I just think that it can be used for the wrong reasons at times.
Yeah, no, I understand that, but it goes back to that point around having a PR exercise versus if you really do have that culture and people are saying, yeah, I don't see an issue, but if you are just saying that just to attract candidates, then but I think sometimes these things can distract us from the real issue, where whether you say that or you don't is really not a big deal. It's probably irrelevant. It's what is the culture that you really have. It's like I always get frustrated when somebody messages and says or comments saying, "Oh, don't use the term BAME." And I'm thinking, well, I don't really care what category you put me in. Like, sort these issues out. That's more important. And we just get stuck on terms and what everyone is saying.
Yeah, I mean, and that's again a core issue with. So you look at the 20, 30 careers sites nowadays, they all look the same. They all use the same terminology, the same language. They mean nothing now. And having phrases like "we're a family" or "we've got great culture," that means nothing. Tell people it's okay to say we're a family if you can then back that up and say, what does that mean? Like, contextually here, why are we telling you we're a family? What does that mean if you come and join us? And give some detail around it. So a lot of the work that we do with OpenOrg is workshops, for example, with companies around saying like, hey, it's okay for you to say this, but you've got to back it up. What does it mean? If you're going to put a badge on your site, tell people why you won that badge, what it means, and give them a link to like a public page so they can see some depth to it. And in that sense, we don't judge what you do and don't say necessarily. It's about the context behind it too. So that's also important.
Okay. Well, thanks a lot, Adam, for joining the podcast and sharing your insights around transparency. Thanks, everyone, for listening. And we will speak to you in the next episode of Case of the Mondays.